Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, April 18th. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to have another fun critique, as we always do. Let's see, who do we have on the hand today? We have Winston Munns here. We've got Steve Horrell. We've got CLAS. Dr. Q's here. Nancy Tunnell. Shape of Soup. Jamie Thomas is here. Patty Arbor. Dick Westheimer. Amy Dower-Solorzano. Rachel Grieve is here, PMB. Maria Berg is here. Maria Berg. Yeah, I saw a poem, a submission from Maria Berg. Let me see, where was that? Because I think that was lower than the one. Let's do Maria's today. If I can find it again. 1 second. Well, you can see what's going on. So anyway, yeah, it's the Critique of the Week, as always. And what we like to do is give that workshop experience that's so valuable. Talking about what works and what doesn't for poems. How do they actually affect people? You know, what makes sense, what doesn't. So much of poetry and so much of writing is context that we don't know that other people are writing about. This really helps with that. Now, as always, we're going to go through a poet that we're going to go through poets first, who to lead off the show, somebody who regularly participates, and then we're going to go through the oldest submissions in the queue. The queue dates back to about November right now, and we have a lot more submissions in the queue because I've been telling people we got under like 80 left to review, and I thought I'd start sort of talking about the Critique of the Week a little more. Now we're up to 160 submissions in the queue, so we're going to kind of go through as fast as we can through the oldest submissions, go to those sort of quickly, and then we'll spend more time, of course, on the people who give their time here and help other poets like Maria does. We also have a couple other poets I saw in there. Let's see. Well, anyway, so Sharon Ferrante's here. Who else? Tom Barlow's here. David Boos is here. All right, well, that's great. Hammett Malik is here. Brian O'Sullivan, Ollie Rowland. Dick Westheimer's here. Okay, so yeah, we got a good group on hand, as we always do. And we're going to take out, so as always, if you would like to participate in the Critique of the Week, all you got to do is go to rattle.com, up in the menu, find Critique of the Week under Contents, and you can submit up to 2 poems. These are not just random submissions that we've put in that people don't know they're coming up. People are asking for these reviews. And so that's one of the reasons we can feel free to be honest and open, because that's what we're all trying to be helpful. And these are poets who are asking for help. And so, honesty is something that's hard to come by. And letting everybody know what you think about their submissions and what's working, how they can be expanded, what should be cut, what's boring. Line break issues, anything that comes up, feel free to leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube. I'll try to keep an eye on Facebook to see if anybody's around with comments there. But mostly it's on YouTube these days because YouTube likes us better. All right, so here we go. So the first poet is going to be Maria Berg, who submitted this about a month ago, March 20th. She had 2 poems here. Her website is experiencewriting.com, so check that out if you would like. A celebration of writing, reading, and creativity is that website. So that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Marie. Here, we'll put that on the screen. So if anyone wants to check out Maria Berg and other things she does, that's experiencewriting.com. Was it? Yeah, .com. So check that out. Now, we're going to take a look at these poems, though. No general questions. There is a question tab or a question field if you'd like to ask some questions, in particular things that you're focusing on. But we'll just go in head first with these. So here we go. This is Maria L. Berg. Maria from Washington State. And here we go. So this is the first poem. Fear like an aging performer. Sits sipping tonic water at a checkered table in his bar. Eyes glassed over, wearing his best wig, his sequined suit, still as a mannequin, avoided by his patrons. He conserves every wiggle in his hips, every flutter of his fingers, his brightest, widest smiles, the twinkles and flashes and sizzle of his glances, until it's time to jump up, to jump out, to suddenly appear from around the corner, behind the curtain, behind the mask, out of the shadows, under the hot lights. He comes alive, and his voice brings chills, his moves bring thrills. He grabs you, owns you, makes you shake and won't let go, makes you scream for more, then steals your breath. Then, as suddenly he's gone, leaving you empty, exhausted in the dark, until the house lights flood the room. Yeah, so does fear like an aging performer. And there's some nice lines. I especially liked the end. I like the exhausted in the dark until the house lights flood the room. This is one of those poems. So we're personifying fear through the whole poem. And the poem works the best when those personifications are the most vivid and detailed. And so, like, that last line is a good example of that, where you can really see the house lights flooding the room. It's something very particular. That's where the poem's working best. Shape of Soup says good momentum, nice descriptive lines, and good rhythms in this one, says David Boos. Yeah, I agree. So, let's see. Yeah, Sarah Rashid Khan says I was in and out of the poem, and that's how I felt too. I think it was working in some parts. Other parts were a little bit bland and not really adding, not really stimulating as much. And so I think that's the thing to really focus on with this poem. Morgan Feeney says, I feel the line length works well for this poem, seems to draw the reading through, and you could feel how Tim went through it really well. Yeah, it's true. I think the line breaks are really done. The line breaks, we were talking, who was it? Oh, it was Ruth Reichel for the food poems issue. She was, I didn't know this, that her dad was a designer, like a book designer. And he designed some famous books, including the American version of Ulysses, which I didn't know. But he always, pounded in the mantra of, like, stay out of the way. The book designer is there for the benefit of the writer and shouldn't be noticed. And if you read a book and you notice that you're reading it easily, that's the book designer, but you don't even know. You shouldn't even think about it. And that's the thing with line breaks. That's what works here. You don't want to be thinking about the line breaks as you're reading the poem. You want the line breaks to be in service of the rhythm of the poem. And I think that works really well here too. So good point, whoever it was that brought that up. Okay, so fear like an aging performer. And I wonder... first of all, I don't know about, I maybe just call it fear and not add the aging performer. But that's just a personal opinion. Dick Westheimer says, a lot I like to like about this, great images and command of the language, but I am partial to poems where I can see the poet coming through. Yeah. And I think what Dick means is having more, so we have this sort of list poem where we're personifying fear, and we're going through all the things he does. But if you see, I think Dick means like getting a sense of what the poet's actually afraid of and how this story is personal to you. And I think that can come out too. Somebody said the poem they felt, it was Sarah Rashid Khan said they felt going in and out of the poem. And I think the main thing is having all the lines be adding something interesting. And I think that's what is better or a way to focus. Ansuya Ace maybe leave out the like in the title. Yeah, I think that might be better too without that. I think there are a few options. You could just call it fear, and then that allows for a real cut between the poem and the title, which allows you to like leap the gap, like have the reader participate a little bit more in the poem. So that's something to consider. And also another thing to consider is that similes are weaker than direct metaphors, and so cutting the like, if you don't need it, usually improves the metaphor. So cutting like would be a good thing to consider here for the title. So there are a few options. I'd maybe tinker with the title a little bit because you can jump right in the way it was going. Okay, so anyway, fear. And then if we called it, notice how if we just take out the like, we don't lose anything, but you gain, what you lose is sort of a distance from the metaphor because the like is sort of adding a layer. It's sort of not actually this, but it's like this. And that's a more mild, moderated kind of comparison. So notice if we just say fear, an aging performer sits sipping tonic water at a checkered table in this bar. I think that's a great opening. Yeah. Yeah. So Shape of Soup says it's a solid idea. Thoughtful execution just needs maybe a little of lens focus. Yeah. So anyway, so let's keep going. So the beginning, the first couple lines have a lot of detail. Tonic water is a nice specific detail. The checkered table, and that really helps set the scenes. There's little tiny details that bring the scene into a specificity that brings it to life, really. And so I think those are great, a great opening for this poem. And we know where we are. We're talking about fear. We're personifying fear, and then we're starting to see it. So fear sits sipping tonic water at a checkered table in his bar. Now, eyes glassed over, wearing his best wig. The eyes glassed over, I mean, it's sort of close on those cliched expressions, eyes glazed over, and in a way that, I don't know if changing it to glassed does anything specific unless you describe it. So if the eyes are going to be glassed over, glazed over would just be a cliche, but glassed, if you're going to do that, like give us a reason for glassed over. I don't know. In the description, how is that different from being glazed over, or glossed over even? So you can add, more detail on this spot, and then wearing his best wig is a great detail too. But what does his best wig look like? Like there's some opportunities to get that similar to the tonic water and the checker table to get a little bit more detail in, just by describing the wig a little bit and describing either cutting or describing what you meant by eyes glassed over. Yeah, Sarah Rashid Khan says the eyes glassed over is where I fell out while you were reading the first time, I think because it's too abstract. Yeah, I'm just not sure what that really means. And so if it does mean something specific and interesting, elaborate a little more so we can know where you're getting at. And if not, James Spencer says, isn't glassed over trying to say fear is wearing glasses? Well, if that's the case, yeah, describe the glasses. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so that those are some details that I would add more detail here. His sequin suit still is a mannequin avoided by his patrons. He conserves every. I like the idea of fear being avoided by the patrons. Like nobody's noticing fear, even though it's like, in this big suit and things and dressed all strange. It's still like sort of because nobody wants to look at the fear. I really like that concept of fear being able to sneak in, even though it's very obvious. The elephant in the room. He conserves every wiggle in his hips, every flutter in his fingers, his brightest, widest smiles for twinkles and flashes and sizzle of his glances until it's time to jump up. And so here, again, these details are not nearly as interesting as the rest. The twinkles and flashes and sizzle, the flutter of his fingers, the wiggle, they're sort of vague and not, there's not a lot of specificity in there like there was with the tonic water and checkered table that made the poems come to life. So I think less of this, and I think that's why Sarah was falling out of the poem, and I was too. But then he goes later to jump up, to jump out, to suddenly appear from around the corner, behind the curtain, behind the mask, out of the shadows, under the hot lights. So here we get a real rhythm picking up. And even though the poem, it's still a little more vague and abstract than I'd like. I'd like a little more detail in what the shadows look like, what the mask looks like. We could just tweak in just a little places, a little bit more detail, and I think the poem would come to life even more. But the rhythm takes off here. As Rose Lenard said, the rhythm is really good in this section. It's a good riff. Out of the shadows, under the hot lights, he comes alive, and his voice brings chills. Brings chills, this little cliche. So if you're gonna do that, expand on it. Tell us why this is particular and interesting. Similar, the glassed over is a similar type thing. His moves bring thrills. Like, what are the thrills? So we keep going into a little bit too much vagueness throughout the poem, and to stay as engaging as it could be, and it is at its peak. So that's the thing to focus on. He grabs you, owns you, makes you shake and won't let go, makes you scream for more, then steals your breath. Then, as suddenly he's gone, leaving you empty, exhausted, in the dark, until the house lights flood the room. And so we feel, I feel really strongly through the rhythm, the tension of the way the fear grips you. I think that's the aspect of it. But I think the whole poem coming to life more is just having a few more specific details sprinkled throughout. I think that's really the key to this one. Just not having the mask be just a mask, but some kind of specific mask. A little bit of description of that, a little bit of description of the shadows. Yeah, Sharon Friendly says I love the ending, and I do too. I think and that sort of the anxiety building through the rhythm enters really, sort of culminates really nicely with being exhausted in the dark and the house lights flood the room. Yeah. Let's see. Tom Barlow says the reader enters the poem rather late. Deb T says, does fear make us scream for more? That kind of puzzles me. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I'm not sure how well that fits, that one line. Chelsea McClellan says, I like appearing around the corner to remain in the metaphor. What corner would the performer be coming around? Yeah, those are the kind of details that I think are just missing. So the poem, where it gets abstract, it just doesn't engage as much as it could. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I think that's just all there is to say about the poem. I think it's a good start to the poem. There's good energy. There's a good sense of rhythm to it. It's just a matter of adding more details, expanding just a little bit, and finding those things, and cutting back on the things that we talked about that are a bit cliche, and they're a bit too vague. And finding the right balance of that is the key to making this poem work. Let me see. Anything else? Let's see if anybody over on Facebook. So Jenny Middleton's got, let's see. She says, Jenny Middleton says, I like the way the poem is like a portrait of fear. It's very visual. I think of a clown from the opening descriptions. I think many people are scared of clowns. Could the reasons for this be more explored fully? That's a great point. And then, and Jenny also said about the glass, or maybe glassed over means detached from other people. Yeah, if we could expand on that, I think that'd be a good idea. But yeah, the clown sort of drops out too. The description of fear, and just adding more detail. And I think that the poem will really come to life. It's a good idea. We're setting the scene really well. We can feel the emotional energy behind it. So it's just a matter of adding more. And it doesn't have to be, just the interesting thing is when you read a book and then you watch the movie. I can't remember what movie my daughter was talking about. She read and then read then watched the movie. But the having the character you build, even though you're filling in the details yourself, your imagination is building this whole character that you can actually see when you read a novel or a poem or anything. And there's all these like little details that they don't have to be something specifically thought out. It's just what your mind puts in there, and including some of those to guide us along and make that come to life is the key. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next poem from Maria. Again, this is Maria Berg. And this is He's in My Head. And again, the reason why we like to do two is we can see if it's sort of a general tendency to work on or sort of a one-off thing that we want to improve on as a writer to make these poems come to life more. And we'll see if that's the case or if there's totally different things going on. So the last poem really had nice rhythm, nice line breaks, a good sense of movement, in an arcing kind of way. There was a point to the poem, some emotion behind it. So it had all that going for it, just a little too vague and generalized to connect as much as it could. Let's see if this is the same case with He's in My Head. I am always moving. Sitting still is immoral. I battle nature's encroachment. Clover is my enemy, its roots strong and branching. I can do it all myself and expect you, no, demand you, do the same. Rain or shine, I will tame and tinker. My pennies saved do work, everyone earned through sweat. I am the roaring engine, the chainsaw tearing wood. I will arrive unannounced. With expectations you will jump to. If you don't hear me, you are false. If you don't act before I ask, you have failed. I am holding this world steady. Without my actions, it all breaks down. It all breaks anyway. But I fix it, and then I fix it again until it crumbles. I am always running out of glue. So I think here, I'd say the same kind of things happen in this poem too, where there's a good sense of movement. We're going to a destination. We're actually, something is changing in the poem. And there's a really good ending. I'm always running out of glue. That's sort of surprising and inevitable at the same time, which is a nice, explanation of what we want to see in ending. So I think that part of it is working really nicely. Yeah, and so Nancy Sabanek and Rachel Grieve both say, so Rachel says this feels like a riddle, and Nancy Sabanek says, like the strong declarative statements, it feels like a riddle. Sheba Soup says this is a cognitive poem. I like it. I find the contrast with my own appreciation of stillness interesting. And Amy Arnold Fernandez says, what is the clover encroaching on? Yeah. Okay, so let's read it one more time, a little more slowly here. I am always, he's in my head. I am always moving. Sitting still is immoral. I battle nature's encroachment. Clover is my enemy. Its roots strong and branching. I can do it all myself and expect you. No demand you. Do the same. Rain or shine, I will tame the tinker and tinker. My pennies saved do work. Everyone earned through sweat. I am the roaring engine, the chainsaw tearing wood. I will arrive unannounced with expectations you will jump to. If you don't hear me, you are false. If you don't act before I ask, you have failed. I am holding this world steady. Without my actions, it all breaks down. It all breaks anyway, but I fix it, and then I fix it again until it crumbles. I am always running out of glue. Yeah. So as James Spencer says, I like the riddling, but feel defeated rather than being given all the pieces to solve the riddle. Somebody suggested, where was it? Yeah, and I'm not sure what the answer to the riddle is either. James Spencer says Plath's metaphor is a good example of a riddle that gives all the pieces. Yeah, and that's how I feel too. Does anybody know what the answer to the riddle is? Like who he's in my head? PMB says feels like the poem starts on the third stanza. And Amy Dower Solorzano says, I want to pin down the you. And I think that's the issue. I mean, it's like, who's the he? And then the he is the you, but who is that? And so, yeah, I have trouble solving the riddle to it. And Mary Ellen Carr says the poem did not engage me. And I suppose I'm not really sure. Is it... Spencer says maybe time? Yeah, so this poem has us feeling a little lost. Yeah, who's the he and who's the you? He's in my head. I am always moving. Do you want to let's look at it's a one of the great poems in English, Sylvia Plath's Metaphor. If anybody, there's, talking about Richard Wilbur has a few, but I can't name the titles off the top of my head. So this is Metaphors by Sylvia Plath. I think this is from an essay in Shenandoah about it, but let's look at the poem itself. Metaphors. I am a riddle in 9 syllables, an elephant, a ponderous house, a melon strolling on 2 tendrils. O red fruit, ivory, fine timbers, this loaf's big with its yeasty rising, money's new minted in this fat purse. I'm a means, a stage, a cow and calf. I've eaten a bag of green apples, boarded the train, there's no getting off. Yeah, and so if you can tell with that, a few of the things. The first one is I'm a riddle in 9 syllables is fun because it's a syllabic poem with each line being 9 syllables and each one sort of a statement in a part of the thing. Yeah. Yeah, so for Sylvia Plath's poem, it's pregnancy. And that's why you have the 9 syllables and the 9 months and all these things. Once you unlock that, once you realize that's what she's talking about, all these things make sense. Let's read it again. It's 9 lines, 9 syllables per line, and metaphor is 9 letters exactly. It's a really intricate poem. It's really cool. I mean, Sylvia Plath is great. That's why. I'm a riddle in 9 syllables, an elephant, a ponderous house, a melon strolling on 2 tendrils. I mean, you can imagine like those descriptions of being 9 months pregnant, right? Oh, fruit, oh, red fruit, ivory, fine timbers. This loaf's big with its yeasty rising. Yeah. Money's new minted in this fat purse. I'm a means, a stage, a cow and calf. I've eaten a bag of green apples, boarded the train, there's no getting off. Yeah, so that's pregnancy to Sylvia Plath and her poem Metaphors. But notice how there's no, the generalities and the vagueness, like all the details are really strong, specific details. This it's a short poem, but see how much we have, you know. It's red fruit, ivory, fine timbers, and talking about all the things we talked about before. This loaf's big with its yeasty rising. It's a loaf. It's not just I'm big and rising. It becomes a bread loaf. So there's that metaphor in there too, but it's very specific and concrete about it. And then I'm a means, a stage, a cow and calf. Yeah. PMB says, but it's difficult to imagine how we'd interpret this poem without being told what it's about. I think the thing is, and I try to wait a little bit for people to have time to guess. But if you sit and ponder it for a little bit, you figure it out eventually, because all the clues that you need are here. And so that's what, if you're going to have a riddle type poem, like the answer needs to be there, even if it's tough to figure out. And there are other poems that are working like that too. But it's because, as and Suya A says, I love this. Every word works very well. Everything is adding detail. There's nothing that's a waste. There's 9 syllables per line, and we need all those 9 syllables. Every syllable adds something to the whole of the poem. And each line on its own is interesting in a way that makes it so, even if you don't get, you don't understand what's a riddle for, you are interested enough to know that there's an answer to it there if you keep thinking about it. So then you want to keep thinking about it. I think that's one thing that makes a riddle. It's a necessity for a riddle poem. It has to be like densely and well written enough that you want to keep reading it and long enough to figure it out. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that is that poem. Let's switch back to Fear. He's in my head again, and we have to figure out if it's going to be a riddle type poem, we have to be able to resolve it. Yeah, as Morgan Finney says, obviously people will get riddles differently based on their different experiences, but I guess just based on 9 syllables, other people will come on it in a different way. Yeah. Okay, so let's read this one more time. He's in my head. I am always moving. Sitting still is immoral. I battle nature's encroachments. Clover is my enemy. Its roots strong and branching. So earlier on, this is what my interpretation. I think my father's always in my head, is what it is, and that was my interpretation of it. I'm not sure that. I saw a few people mention like your father's voice. I think, and that was what I was feeling because. The father sort of always working, and it's he in my head. And then this sort of, moralizing about like sitting still being immoral. So that was my interpretation of it. But let's see if we have enough of it there to be confident in that. He's in my head. I'm always moving. Sitting still is immoral. I battle nature's encroachment. Clover is my enemy. Its roots strong and branching. I can do it all myself and expect you. No, demand you do the same. Rain or shine, I will tame and tinker. My pennies saved, do work. Every one earned through sweat. I am the roaring engine, the chainsaw tearing wood. I will arrive unannounced with expectations you will jump to. If you don't hear me, you are false. If you don't act before I ask, you have failed. I am holding this world steady. Without my actions, it all breaks down. It all breaks anyway. But I fix it. And then I fix it again until it crumbles. I'm always running out of glue. And yeah, and so again, so if I look at the Sylvia Plath poem, once you realize, I guess maybe that's the thing, a poem that's a riddle, like once we find the answer, we have to like be confident that we found it. And I think this, that my interpretation of it, I don't think was right, or it wasn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel satisfyingly complete. So I'd say we're still kind of lost. Janet McConaughey says God, maybe, or maybe Father Time to personify it a little more. Someone else said the super ego. Yeah, Nancy Snell says the father attacks weeds. Clover invading the yard. It really sounds like a dad to me. Yeah. Patty Arbor says taste in poetry is so personal, but I'm not sure what the point of riddle poetry is. I do think riddle, like writing poems in the form of a riddle, is something that has to be, you have to be really careful with. It's a dangerous thing to do because just satisfying a riddle is never satisfying. Like figuring out what it is, and it's really easy to fall into this trap of like setting something up as a riddle and thinking that the work to reveal what the riddle is going to be emotionally and intellectually satisfying. And it only is if there's things we learn about it like a regular poem anyway, and that we understand for sure what we're getting out of the riddle, you know. And so I almost had a memory of a different poem I could share that's really short. What is it? I can't remember. It was Kimberly Gibson Tran's topic. Says riddle poems typically should be more literal objects, I think. The poem is to make something ordinary more strange. Yeah, there was one poem that made me think of, and now I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, yeah. Shape of Soup says, I appreciate this even more on the second read. It's about the tangible texture of the emotional state. Dry Mantito, this is a great point, says, trust is the currency of a riddle poem, so it's almost impossible to have a successful riddle poem unless the reader already knows and trusts the poet, or if you have enough poetic devices and enough, skill on display, enough, the poem is well plated enough that you trust the poem just looking at the poem. Like there's poems that the poet knows what they're doing, and you cut them a little bit more slack. But yeah, this poem, to me, I just feel a little too nebulous. I feel like I just don't quite know who the he is. There's several different sort of options in the game of Clue as to who the person is. Is it a father? Is it the superego? Is it God? Is it, and I think it's not quite resolved. And at the same time, it has that same sense of vagueness of detail that isn't as engaging as things could be. Yeah, as PMB says, I don't really care enough to give it too much thought. And that's sort of the issue. The poem has to be clicking on all these other levels to engage us enough to want to solve the riddle. It's one of the dangers of the riddle type poem. And so I think it's interesting. I battle nature's encroachment. Clover is my enemy. Its roots strong and branching. If we had the answer to the riddle, a line like that would be really, it would work well. There's specific detail there. It's memorable, and if it sort of locked into the puzzle in a perfect way, that would be a great section if we knew what the answer was, maybe. But then the next one, I can do it all myself and expect you. Demand you do the same. I mean, you see how there's no detail, there's nothing to take away from you. It's maybe there's a bit of a voice that you can hear sort of nagging at you, but there's not a whole lot to hold on to when you leave the poem from that section. There's like almost nothing to bring away. And I think that's one of the things that causes someone like PMB to not feel like they're connected enough to care about solving the riddle. So I think it's stanzas like that make this kind of poem not quite work. They have to all be stanzas like this, where they were interesting and unusual, and then it's going to feel really good when you solve the riddle. And you have that if it was like 4 or 5 stanzas like this, and then we got the answer at the end, it would really work. And so I think that's the thing to shoot for. Emily Arnold Fernandez says, Amanda Scott has a line in her most recent book about self-criticism, like your parents at their most psychotic. And that line will stay with me a long time. Interesting. Shape of Soup says, hot take, I don't think it matters who it is. Let go of that and you appreciate it more for what it is. Yeah. I don't know. I feel left out not knowing. It's not to be a specific person. The he is in my head can be, something abstract too, but it feels like I need to know it's something or else, yeah. Holly York says, I'm late, so really riddled here. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the case. So this poem, both poems are intriguing. Thanks for sharing both, Maria. I think a little bit more, just in general, more specific, concrete details would help the poems come to life. The riddle type poem is more specifically focused on the riddle. We just need a little bit more resolution to it. Okay, let's move on to another poet. We'll try to move I always say we're going to move fast. We'll try to move as fast as we can through these. And next in line in the old critique, I got to pull it back up again. The oldest one in the queue right now dates back to, it's Marty Smith from November 29th. He's got 2 poems. It says, these are 2 poems I wrote in the 1980s when I attempted to employ some experimental structure in my verse. So I guess I'd like to know your thoughts on classic structures versus invented structures. So that's interesting. That's Marty Smith. Marty from Toronto, Ontario. And here are these poems. This is 2. The first one's called Songs About Life. So very old poems too, 20 plus years old, or 40 plus, this view. 40 plus years old here. That's interesting. Song About Life. There are lovers in the meadow in the night. They came on a white horse, spread their blankets in the grass, the horse munching. There are lovers in the meadow in the night. I saw their skin shimmer in the moonlight, saw their ecstasy shoot across the sky, saw the moon bend down to kiss them, the horse munching. There are lovers in the meadow in the night. I saw God smiling, the horse munching. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. They came singing, danced a circle in the grass bending. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. I saw their faces dancing in the sunlight, saw their joy rising on clouds, saw the sun dancing with them, the grass bending. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. Oh, I saw God singing, the grass bending. So there's that poem. So Song About Life. And I like the line, there are lovers in the meadow in the night. And I like the way that it's used as a refrain. There's a slight strangeness to it, which I think that's the most intriguing part of the poem to me. And if the whole poem had that sort of sense of intrigue, all of it sounds nice, as Rachel Grief says. Also, Rachel says, I love the horses. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Trent says, I quite like the repetition and variation in this poem. I think the problem to me is the rest of the poem doesn't have as much of that sort of wonderful mystery that the lovers in the meadow in the night. There's a beautiful sound to that. I like they came on a white horse, spread their blankets in the grass, the horse munching. There are lovers in the meadow in the night. So up to that point, I think the poem was working really well. I saw their skin shimmer in the moonlight. I mean, it's kind of, just a cliched type description. Saw their ecstasy shoot across the sky. Saw the moon bend down to kiss them. The horse munching. So for this whole section, I feel we haven't really added a whole lot to the poem. And notice how there's a potential for mystery and something surprising and unusual in the first, 6 lines. And then it becomes like nothing is added. Nothing's really strange or surprising in the rest to me. There's a lot of cliche type imagery that's not precisely tied to any movement. There's not a mystery to it. So, there are lovers in the meadow in the night. I saw guides smiling, the horse munching. Someone said, a lot of munching going on. It feels like a lot of munching. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. They came singing, danced in a circle in the grass bending. So I like that. I like the children dancing a circle in the grass. I think there could be, as somebody was saying, a kind of mythological type poem hidden in here, the fairy tale aspect of the white horse. But it had to be condensed down and have a little bit more surprising things going on, I would say. James Spencer says, compression might help. I recently read Minutes of Hexagram 17 by Lucy Mercer. Might be inspiring. Yeah. Emily Arnold Fernandez says it would be more surprising if we didn't know they were lovers at first, but who else would arrive in a white horse in moonlight? Yeah, that's true. Dry Mantito said the horse munching is both strangely mysterious and mundanely literal. That's a magical combination. I agree too. And so that's why that first opening I think works really well. It just feels like we don't go anywhere past that. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. So it's some kind of like circle of life type thing where the adults make the children are there during the day. I saw their faces dancing in the sunlight, saw their joy rising on clouds, saw the sun dancing with them, the grass bending. There are children in the meadow in the broad day. I saw God singing, the grass bending, bending. It just feels like we're sort of repeating ourselves. If you're going to have that refrain repetition, we need stuff added. We need adding to the mystery. And instead, the poem sets up a little bit of mystery, has some music, but then kind of goes nowhere and just spins its wheels with it. And that's the problem. It's not the form or the structure, which was the question about the poem. It's that nothing more happens after that initial sort of intriguing setup that we have. And so, like you're a storyteller, push the story forward, like make something surprising happen. As Winston Munn said, I don't see that the poet discovered anything in this writing, and that's how it feels to me. There was an image, and we just sort of hovered there without, Rachel Grief says, bury the horse in the grass. Okay. Well, let's take a look at the other poem. Two spirits in one. These two spirits in one hold, where the eagle parts the wind over the world, where creators choir sing. These two spirits sing one line together. These two spirits in one hold, in course round sun, and through death, these two hold one breath. These two spirits breath one breath together. Yeah, so this, I had a little trouble reading some of this. These two spirits in one hold. Which is a repetition of the first line, but then the hold isn't conjugated as a verb. So that makes it a little confusing to read. Then where the eagle parts the wind over the world, where creators choir sing. Shouldn't that be plural, sings? These two spirits sing one line together. Again, this feels riddly, like that poem we were talking about before. These two spirits in one hold, in course, in a course, they were missing an article there, round the sun and through death, these two hold one breath. These two spirits, I think it should just be breathe one breath together. And it's missing the E. So I think that's just a typo. Yeah, as Nancy Tunnell says. It's Kimberly Gibson Tran. We need some line of story or setting to grab onto better. There's nothing here to hold on to. There's not, again, I think this is the topic of the day, but details are just so important. Just a few details, and we get to enter into whatever you're talking about. There's a poem, let me see. I think there's if I can pull it up quickly, rattle. J.R. Solanchi has a poem that this sort of reminds me of, but you can see how a little bit of detail. Was it Lover of Stone? Here's another. So this is sort of a vague, sort of spiritual, philosophical type poem in the same sort of vein. But see how the details, just little details added to this poem, make this poem come to life. Okay? And this is J.R. Solanchi's The Lover of Stone. And we'll see. It reminded me of that in some vague way. So we'll see how that feels. The Lover of Stone. The lover of stone must be old, for there is no such thing as a young stone. The lover of stone must be strong, for he must be able to climb the mountain and summit the mountain to find the beginning of stone. And he must be able to climb down the mountain again to the valley and to the bottom of the valley to find the ending of stone. The lover of stone must be a genius at unrequited love. He must be a connoisseur of the cold. The lover of stone must be a saint, for stone will no more return his love than does God return that of a saint. The lover of stone must be jealous. He must be jealous of the water that loves stone to smooth, and he must be jealous of the wind that loves stone to death. And so that poem, you notice it has the same, the same sense of this abstract. There's not a lot of specificity in time or place. It's this very pulled apart from any kind of time. It's atemporal type poem, and yet with just a little bit of detail, we have so much more adding into the poem. It shows how, this is Kimberly Gibson Tran says, it shows how new items advance the story along with the refrain and the couplet. Yeah, so we have that refrain coming through the whole time, and then we get these extra details. And the details, even though we still have this sort of God's eye view where everything is abstract and distant, it's still adding on to the story and propelling stuff forward by giving us a little more detail. And because of that, because the poet's pushing himself, we end up with that great line. I love the lover of stone must be a genius at unrequited love. He must be a connoisseur of the cold. I love the connoisseur of the cold. Right out of The Snowman by Wallace Stevens. That kind of just a beautiful line, and there's so much to ponder about being a lover of stone and what that means in this poem. And it is, like we've been talking about, riddle type poems. There's a sense of riddle to this one. And I think actually there's a missing period here, which probably happened when we were updating the website. So I could go back and fix that. But there's sort of a mystery that builds in this poem too. Yeah. So how can we add like that kind of detail to this poem is the real question. Okay, we're going to move on to another poem, but thanks for sharing. That was Marty Smith. And just details. Add some more. Even in a vague, distant philosophical poem with very deep, extended metaphor, you still need to add some details. The eagle parts the wind over the world where the Creator's choir sing. And clear up the syntax. But if there were added details like that throughout, we might end up with a poem that goes somewhere and feels like it's doing something. Okay, so that's the advice there. Let's go next in line to, this one's going to be Samia Sadiquil. Is that an I or a? Sorry, it's a small gray letter. Samia Sadiqui from Islamabad in Pakistan. This is Pickpocket. Is the poem. No general questions, only one poem included. Let's take a look. Pickpocket. I leave clues for you to find my poetry, a gateway to the screaming that goes on in my mind relentlessly. You think I added those grains for rhyme, but they unwind in my head all the time. They are saying you were never on my side. It doesn't unnerve me because I was never on mine. In all our childhood games of hide and seek, all you ever chose was hide. Pickpocketing fragments of me, a victim of your well-disguised intimacy, shifting eyes dart right and left, conceal your riches swift and deft, hands too full to dig up my trauma, left covered by your pinpricks, no more falling for your cheap tricks. I'm not a criminal. The damage I did is minimal. I just killed my imagination. Have I become your fascination? I guess there's two poems. That's Pickpocket is the first poem. So this is one of those poems where I think the rhyme starts to be driving the poem too much. We kind of, in the opening parts of the poem, the rhymes are a little distant. There's space. It's not metered and it's not short lines. So we kind of don't notice that the rhymes poetry and relentlessly is just only that little E. And the rhyme and time, there's far enough away apart that you don't notice them. The side and hide in the second stanza, line 1 and 3, rhyme, but there's so much distance in between them. But then we end up, the rhymes start to get close, and we get this sing-song you kind of feel where the rhyme is driving us to write the poem, and that's what you really want to avoid. Because it's really easy to sort of and really what happens is that you end up having your first rhyme, the first thing you think of, be the thing that guides the story forward. And when that happens, you end up just sort of spinning your wheels in these cliched directions. Because it's like becomes a word association game. If I say pinpricks, you think tricks, and then you end up having tricks be in your poem. Whereas you should be trying to find unusual rhymes. It really helps to use slant rhymes or near rhymes, things like that, to bring yourself to surprising places. And you always want to be surprising yourself with your poems, because if you're not surprising yourself, you're just sort of rehashing a sort of basic model of reality that's not that interesting to anybody. We're engaged by your surprise. And so the key is to always be surprising yourself in writing. And when you let the rhymes drive what you're putting down line by line, you end up going to unsurprising places, and then we're bored as writers. And so that's the first thing to talk about, is just don't let the rhymes drive. I'm not a criminal. The damage I did is minimal. Like those kind of rhymes where you just see criminal, minimal, how can I get minimal in there? That makes for a poem that doesn't really, it's not functioning on the level of a poem anymore. And so we need to be really wary of that and not let that happen. Second off, I think some people were saying, Morgan Feeney says, Beyond the rhymes, which I agree with Tim, feel jarring. I just don't know who the I and the you are in this poem. Who is this for or to? Also, there's just not enough story. I think, some people were talking about in the past, is the story, needs more of the story to be told. Yeah. Chelsea McClellan says, Winston, Dick, I echo Dick. If we allow it, the form can kill our unwanted willful will, or prop the muse, as he said. If the form is only guardrails, it has no purpose. Yeah. Let's see. Maria L. Burke says the title had so much potential that I was already let down by the first line. Yeah, so pickpocket is interesting. I agree. There aren't that many poems about pickpockets. It could be really interesting. Dick Westheimer says 92% on Rhyme Zone. Now you know the single secret of my success. Yeah, that's the perfect amount of rhyme. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson says, another I and you poem. I'm starting to realize it's better to get a sharper description of the relationship to know how to judge the speaker. I feel the speaker could win me with more vulnerability. Yeah. And so, what's the relationship between the I and the you? We have to know those things to care. We just need more of the story too. So don't follow the rhyme and tell us more of the story. And those are just refrains on the critique of the week every week almost. But okay, let's read the second poem. Again, this is Samia Siddiqui from Pakistan. Pricking happiness. Your happiness prickles me. Bitterness trickles in, clawing at my skin. Conscience guilty. Incoming bile. A chasm deluge with melancholy. Her hand in yours. I can't reconcile. Her nail polish minimalistic. Periwinkle blue and dewy. My instincts animalistic. Ensanguined by your brown curls, her fingers loop around those tortoise swirls. Wheels whirring into motion, you've caught up onto me, a fool's notion. She's pretty, a sculptress, a shape you cracked, reshaping your cracked skyline. I am petty, my sucker mast and serpentine. You make up the R in righteousness. Yeah. And so for this one, again, I feel a lot of that rhyme driving the poem again. So it's the same thing, a thing definitely to avoid and pay attention to. There's some nice details that emerge in this poem that haven't in previous, including the last submission too. I like the, let's see. So we had your happiness. Let's read through it. We'll talk about what works and what doesn't really quick. Okay. Prickling happiness. Your happiness prickles me. Bitterness trickles in. So we have the trickles rhyme there, which seems pretty forced. Clawing at my skin. Again, that's a cliche, and it sort of get to the in rhyme. Conscience, guilty, abstract. So none of this is really working yet. Incoming bile. I'm not sure where to place that or what's really going on. A chasm deluged with melancholy. Her hand in yours. I can't reconcile. Her nail polish, minimalistic, periwinkle blue and dewy. So I like that a lot. Once we go to her hand in yours, when we talk about we need to know who the I and the you is, that kind of level is all we need. Her hand in yours, I can't reconcile. Her nail polish, minimalistic, periwinkle blue and dewy. Resenting the hand that you're holding, we suddenly know who the you is, who the I am, and a whole lot about the situation just from those little lines. Her hand in yours, and I'm annoyed by it. And so that's the little bit of detail we need to figure out who the you and the I are and what we're talking about, who the subjects are of this poem, and then we can be connected more to what's actually going on. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about needing, and more early on, because until we get that, the poem sort of floats in this nebulous space that we don't really know where we are. And also the details of the periwinkle blue and dewy are really nice. They're unusual descriptions, and that makes it stand out. My instincts animalistic. Again, the minimalistic to animalistic is that being drawn to the rhyme instead of letting yourself be surprised. Ensanguined, interesting word choice. That's not a word you see much. Ensanguined by your brown curls. Her fingers loop around those torturous swirls. And the curl swirls, again, it feels like it's being drawn to it, but we do get the torturous, which is nice. Wheels whirring into motion. You've caught up onto me. A fool's notion, the notion motion. So we're just getting in this trap of doing that too much. We need a lot more of the her hand in yours. I can't reconcile. Her nail polish. We need a lot more of that and a lot less of the the abstraction in the focus on the rhyme, and that'll bring the poem to life, make the story come across. Jamie Thomas says there's too much treacle hiding whatever the poet is talking about. Some of it feels like a language experiment in a good way, but I can't reconcile most of what's happening here. Yeah, what's treacle? That's one of those words where I can never remember what it means. What's the definition of that? A British term for uncrystallized syrup producing sugar refining. Okay. Oh, that's maybe why I can't. So it's cloying sentimentality or flattery, and it comes from the British. Interesting. Okay, thanks. I learned something today. Thank you. Yeah. So Mary Lisa says more story and less space, and that's the bottom line. PMB says there seems to be a stream of consciousness that's failing to filter out the cliches of the subconscious. That's a good way to put it. That's PMB. PMB also says maybe better for spoken word than written poetry, which is interesting too. Anyway, so more details and less emphasis on the rhyme. I'm going to go to another poet. Let's see who is next. This one is Kilmany McMichael from another Canadian from British Columbia. 2 poems here. Here's some general questions, though. Hello, Tim and listeners. Thank you for your attention to these 2 poems. I primarily write short fiction, but have been studying poetry primarily by following Rattle's various online offerings for the past year and a bit, and have been lucky enough to see a few poems published. The first of these 2 poems was written several years ago, and while I've had favorable responses from a small group of writer friends, and I keep holding on to it as something that was important for me to write at the time, I feel I need some better qualified opinion on it now. There is something in it. Is there something in it to keep holding on to, or is it too vague to be of further interest? When I first wrote it, I could hear it very well and wonder how to capture the cadence of a piece to the page so that the others can hear what we might when we first write something. The second poem is more recent and hope it shows that I've been learning a bit by following along with these critiques. Listening to poet interviews, thank you again in advance for your thoughts. Kilmany, a.k.a. Mayne. Okay, so let's take a look at these poems. Hydrologic is the title of this one. And let's see, this is the older poem. We'll take a look. Hydrologic. Where the high tide meets the shore, rattles and rakes the stones, tortures the end of land. Towards pebbles, silt, and sand, it grinds and roars. The ocean comes in, tears out wave after wave, the voice of the world we innocently name our earth. It trembles. Us, we try to stand, unstoppable, unchangeable, constantly churning, shifting, changing, coming in. The turning ungentle, ceaseless, inhuman. The noise quenches down, the clamor of the cities built by its side, the engines, the voices, the trains, the sirens, the machines, our swaddlings, washed away, gone someday, a day which is here, tastes near the ocean, comes in, goes out, unending, speeding, slowing, breaking, building, beating eternity. Heedless, it pours into your minute ear, the moon and the cloud froth and foam, salt air makes new, the call of the replete does not recognize you. Turn away. This is too much to take in under your fragile skin. Heart or might let go. Walk away back to the little you know. But the ocean comes in, thunders, chuckles, laughs low, long last. The ocean comes in. The ocean comes. The ocean. So Shape of Soup says this is a poet that appreciates the texture of words. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, I crave just a line of narrative in the churning and the turning. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, I need this poet to tell me who hurt them. And yeah, that's the thing. The poem, there's a nice, what you hear here, I think, is a great example of, a really nice love of language and paying attention to sounds, but not wanting to tell the story and not wanting to let us in on it. As Kimberly Gibson Tran says, I crave a line of narrative here. And I think that, and I think that holds our attention longer, if we just had any sense of what. And so hydrologic doesn't give us anything to go on in that regard. Yeah. As Winston Munn says, immediately the writer is writer, though. Yeah, and I agree with that. Yeah. And also Jamie Thomas says it's going on a touch too long for no scaffolding, but this is really beautiful. And yeah, I agree that too. It's, similar to that Lover of Stone poem. There's certain poems that live in this sort of abstract realm, kind of like like a Beckett play or something, where it's just a coat rack is the tree and that's all that's on stage. And that can work for a certain length of time and without, moving. And I think this sort of lasts too long in here without the characters coming on stage. And so if you want to condense the poem in, I think it's possible to make it work at like half the length, maybe focusing on here. But there's no real sense of, there's no way to connect. There's no open door. There's no welcome mat to the poem where we can enter the house of the poem. So hydrologic. Let me read it one more time though, and maybe we'll get a little bit more in a second reading. Hydrologic, where the high tide meets the shore, rattles and rakes the stone, tortures the end of land, towards pebbles, silt, and sand. It grinds and roars, the ocean comes in, tears out, wave after wave, the voice of the world we innocently name our earth. It trembles us, where we try to stand. So I think, having a rhyme like this, I'll make a few points as we go. Having the rhyme like this so close, and then having any rhyme, feels it's a distraction to me as I'm reading. I would prefer either to have rhyme throughout. There's sort of the uncanny valley of rhyming is where you have a few really strong rhymes or just one, and it stands out like a sore thumb. And if you don't use rhyme more regularly, and that kind of strong end rhyme anyway. So in a poem like this that doesn't have a lot of really strong end rhyme, and if I wanted to use sand and land, I would try to hide it as much as I can by not making sure those don't end on the ends of lines, so they kind of don't stand out as much. So that's one thing. And then talking too about the rhythm. This is a poem that's sort of sparsely punctuated, and the line breaks do a lot of the work of punctuating the poem. And in that case, we have a shift. We're really relying on the line breaks and the stanza breaks to guide our sense of where we are in the poem and how the reading is going. And we have here in this section, there's really a real pause in idea and a pause in breath, and there's no stanza break either. And so that makes the poem a little trippy to read. The voice of the world we innocently name our earth. It trembles us where we try to stand unstoppable. So there's not enough break there, I would say. Yeah. Winston Munn says, sounds exactly as he said, a novice poet trying to learn, but with great potential. Yeah, I totally agree with that. David Booth says, I agree that the rhythms echo the waves coming in, but I wish it went somewhere more concrete. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going a little bit. Unstoppable, unchangeable, constantly churning, shifting, changing, coming in. The turning ungentle, ceaseless, inhuman. The noise quenches down the clamor of the cities built by its side. See, I like that detail. There's some good details in here. The engines, the voices, the trains, the sirens, the machines, our swaddlings. Really nice list there. Washed away, gone someday, a day which here tastes near. And the here and the near it really stands out, that rhyme. That's the other spot, I guess. And I would just try to avoid rhymes, because then you end up sort of anticipating rhyme. And the whole point of rhyme, strong rhyme, is to have the expectation set up and then sort of shuffle around and alter that expectation in pleasing ways. And we don't have enough rhymes to let that happen. The ocean comes in, goes out, unending, speeding, slowing, breaking. So this speeding, slowing, breaking, building, beating, eternity, there's a big difference between that list and the list here of the clamor of cities built by its side, the engines, the voices, the trains. Just seeing the engines, the voices, the trains, the sirens, each of those things adds this whole swirl through your memory and what you've experienced of life of those things. They're very concrete. That's what concrete images do. The next list here, unending, speeding, slowing, breaking, building, beating, eternity, those are all abstractions that don't do that effect. And that's why that's not a list that works as well as the other list. Heedless it pours into your minute ear, the moon and the cloud froth and foam. Salt air makes new the call of the replete, does not recognize you. And again, here, another place where the line break, the format of the poem is all I have to go on as far as what the structure of the sentence is. And it, because the way it's broken there, it's hard, it's a little confusing to read. Turn away. This is too much to take under your fragile skin. And fragile skin's a cliche. We saw it, I think, in the last poem, or maybe 2 poems ago. Heart or might let go. Walk away, back to the little you know. Back, but the ocean comes in, thunders, chuckles, laughs low, long last. The ocean comes in, the ocean comes, the ocean. So if we had this sense of the sounds of the ocean focused on that, juxtaposed with the city, there's something really interesting there. And I think if you shrunk the poem, cut out the stuff that was vague and not working, it would be a working poem. But as people say, this is a good example of a poem that it's a poet that has the love of language and is finding themselves as a writer. And I think that's what the note said, and that's what is true here too. Okay, let's take a look at the newer poem. Again, this is Kilmeny from Vancouver. This is Okanagan rescue pleading with residents to leave raptors outside despite the cold snap. And so already we have so much more detail in this poem. You can see. Okanagan rescue pleading with residents to leave raptors outside despite cold snap. Here we go. And I don't really know what raptors they mean. It's intriguing. So, and why they would want the raptors to be left outside. I guess, we're just talking about birds of prey, and then don't bring them inside just because it's cold. That's kind of funny too. Yeah. You're all too soft, have forgotten the bite of God against your bones. An owl is a fierce thing best left alone, though the yellow eyes big on a wide face may remind you of a child's, and your head might abandon your heart to forget an owl is a fierce thing best left alone. Huddled and blinking in an Arctic outflow, cold, stealing breath from your chest, the predator may remind you of a child. You may decide it best to cover it with a blanket for an owl as a fierce thing. You might decide to bring it inside. You want to do whatever you can, and hugging feathers may remind you of being a child. But the owl, it snaps like the forest crushes bones, disdains and suffers your misguided pity. The owl should be let to its own. Yeah. So that's great. I like, again, I like the topic. I like the detail. Isn't an owl a raptor? I didn't think so, but maybe I'm just wrong. Yes, owls are considered raptors. Okay, well, I learned 2 things today now. That's great. So with this poem, I don't know if anybody said it yet because I haven't looked at the comments, but I really felt like pantoum. I think this poem would really benefit from the form because it kind of repeats itself a little bit, but there's some great lines in the repeating, and there's a lot of like fun irony in the topic that's going on with this poem. And that first few, the first, I'd say, how many lines is that? 7 lines or so, I think worked the best. And a lot of those could become refrains. So I'm really thinking, how could you make this a pantoum and encourage you to push yourself forward that way? And as a reminder, the pantoum is a form where there are 4-line stanzas. The second and fourth lines of one stanza become the first and the third of the second stanza, and that goes on as long as you want to keep it going, really. And it works great for poems like this that are, in your other poem too, are unpunctuated, so you can play a lot with that. You want to have a little bit of variation and surprise as you move through those refrains. But I think this is a poem that could work really well with refrains. So I'll just read the first few lines again and show you what I mean. You're all too soft. You have forgotten the bite of God against your bones. See, that could be a poem or a line that comes up again, is the first line, and maybe I would put the break, switch the break to here. So it's the bite of God against your bones is what repeats, but that would make a great second line becoming a first line kind of pantoum thing. I think that's the first place I thought of that. An owl is a fierce thing best left alone. And that sounds like a good repetition. And we have that repetition here. An owl is a fierce thing best left alone, though the yellow eyes, big and a wide face, may remind you of a child's. And your head may abandon your heart and forget an owl is a fierce thing best left alone. So it just feels at that point like it's asking to be a pantoum. That's my first thought reading this poem. Huddled and blinking in an Arctic outflow, cold, stealing breath from your chest, the predator may remind you of a child. And then we have that too. So that repetition. Are there more repetitions too? This repetition. Yeah, so it's sort of, it has unformed it has like these refrains buried in it that, and so all those things, that's kind of what you want to do, I think. And there are other forms you could do that are repetitive like that, but I think this works best for pantoum. But good details here with that line. You may decide it's best to cover it with a blanket, for an owl is a fierce thing. You might decide to bring it inside. You want to do whatever you can, and hugging feathers may remind you of being a child. But the owl, it snaps like the frost crushes bones. And so here we're sort of also spinning our wheels a little, just repeating ourselves. Like there's a really fun irony. There's good detail. Again, the poet has a really great sense of sound and language that they're playing with. And yet we're sort of repeating ourselves in the poem. And the pantoum will help you because every other line in a pantoum is a repetition, but then that means every other line besides for that is not. And you have to think about new things to say. And I think that will help push the poem forward into surprising directions. It has a lot of potential. It's a really, great title, great topic for a poem. There's a lot to mine there. But I think it sort of stays in the one place, which is that irony of the voice contrasted with the seriousness of it, contrasted with the silliness of bringing an owl in as a pet too. And so I think all that works really well together, but I think a pantoum or some form like that where we're conscious of the refrain, we have to do it at a certain interval, that'll allow us to push the poem in surprising directions, which it doesn't really do now. I think that's the only thing holding it back. I'd call it like a half-finished poem. It's a great idea. It's just ready to be expanded and pushed out with an actual form. Let me see. I haven't looked at the comments in a bit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so most people agree with the pantoum. Shape of Soup says they can't all be pantoums. I don't know. I don't suggest pantoums very often. It's not a form I love, but it's better than a sestina. Holly York says an owl has such a human face with its eyes looking straight ahead. One of the things I would do with this poem too, because I think the problem is it's a great poem, but it doesn't push as far as it could, so it's not like done yet. Research, more into owls, like learn a whole bunch of facts. I can't remember who I was talking to. Said a poet has to be. I think it was Susan Brown just this week. Said a poem has to be an expert in everything, and become an expert in owls now. You're writing an owl poem, become an expert in the owl. And one of the things I learned was taking my kid Colin to the zoo or the animal sanctuary for a school trip. I had no idea that owls are actually the stupidest birds. They're known for wisdom because they look wise, but all they do is, like a knee-jerk reaction, follow prey. They have the smallest brain. They can't be trained. Because they're such good predators, they never had to become wise. In a crow, opposed to an owl, or other corvids like that, they rely on a whole bunch of cunning and stuff to live their lives, and so they end up being the very smart birds, and owls are actually the dumbest of all birds. You can't train them at all. And I think that's a fascinating aspect. There's also the way up. You've probably seen this meme where somebody pulled up like the feathers on an owl to see how tiny and puny its legs actually are. Like there's just little details like that, but you can look at Wikipedia, you can, ask for interesting facts, find different things, become an expert in the owl, and that'll give you a lot of fuel for pushing the poem forward into surprising places and covering more ground with it. Because it's a great setup. Okay. Yeah. Emily Arnold Fernandez says, what happens when the owl is brought inside? What do the humans learn? I want to know the meaning that comes from the owl being brought inside. That's a great, yeah, that too. There's so many places that could go, and actually having the owl inside, like, there's a great story by what's his name, T.C. Boyle. I love, called Tooth and Claw, about somebody who takes in it's not a bobcat, but it's one of those like serval type cats as a wild animal for a pet, and how it ruins his life. And all the scenes with having that claw-filled animal tearing up meat in the guy's apartment are just wonderful. So you can imagine that kind of thing going through. Let me show you another poem too. This is we'll close out like this. This is from a issue of Rattle last year. But this is how you can bring science into poems. And this is a sonnet, so it's a little different type of poem. But once you do some research on owls, you can bring science into it like this. This is on learning that woodpeckers don't have shock-absorbing skulls. Of course they don't. And this is Matthew King, I should say. Of course they don't. Of course they optimize the force that they apply with every blow. They'd have to hammer harder otherwise to do the same amount of work. You'd know this if you used your head for just a bit. You don't because you'd rather let them stand as models of a headspace that you'd fit yourself in gladly. Wouldn't it be grand to bang and bang your brains and never mind? You've seen how many jagged shards they spray. You've seen how deep the holes they leave behind, and thought, of course, they've got to have a way not to feel all the force they must exert. You want to believe it doesn't hurt. So a great last line to that sonnet. But to see how the way that the science, we learn a lot about the woodpecker in the process of this, and Matthew King learned that, became an expert in the woodpecker to do this. He's actually a nature photographer. But it's all to get to this insight in this last line. And so think about it that way. Like, learn as much as you can about owls. What would actually happen if you brought in an owl? What would you feed it? What temperature would you have to keep it at? Use your imagination, feel how that would go, and like bring that story to life, and figure out as you're going, like, what could we learn from having gone through that imaginary experience. And I think that's a lot of places to push the poem farther. As Morgan Feeney said, can sometimes be gained from wikis. Yeah, Wikipedia is a great place because, Wikipedia level knowledge is sort of the amount of knowledge that you have to have as a poet. Okay. CLAS says, does Tim not like sestinas? Yeah, I like form, but it's my least favorite form. I think they tend to just go on forever and sort of push themselves. They insist upon themselves. I'm not huge. Some are great. Occasionally we had some good sestinas, but and Rattle, but usually, I don't know. It's a rough form, but some are great. But it is my least favorite form. Anyway, that's going to wrap up the critique of the week today. Thanks everybody for sharing poems with us. That last one was by Kilmaney, a.k.a. Maney. Okay, so Maney. Thanks for sharing that. And really, I definitely do see the progress. So I'm so glad that what we do, Critique of the Week and whatnot, have been helpful. I think that the second poem there by Maney can be a great poem if it's pushed farther. Really great lines and details. It's really wonderful. All right, that's going to wrap it up. Let's see. Next guest on the Rattlecast. Let me do that first. Or the prompt for this week. Katie's prompt is going to be, let's see, where are we? Yeah, Katie's prompt. Why am I going there? I should have just gone to rattle.com and then clicked on Rattlecast under content and found that the prompt for this week is: write a poem about an echo you've heard more than a few times. Include as many sounds as possible. And that's a good reminder for me because me and Katie are doing a Hyben crown for April, and I haven't done one with echoes in it yet. And so maybe that's a good thing to do for this Hyben that I have to write today. So we'll see. If not, I'll be doing one on Sunday, but we'll find out. But that is your prompt. Write a poem about an echo you've heard more than a few times. Include as many sounds as possible. And then the guest this week coming up is going to be Dave Newman. Now, Dave Newman is, as you probably remember, is the Reader's Choice Award winner for last year's Rattle Poetry Prize. I'm leading this old-timey veteran, that really down-to-earth, engaging completely story-driven and unpedantic poem about the Veterans Hospital that was everybody's pick for the Reader's Choice Award. He got 20% of the votes, roughly, in that from subscribers. He's going to be the guest. He has a bunch of books that he sent, but his newest one that's available for pre-order, I love the title, Better Than Best American Poetry. That's his new book that's coming out soon. So I'm not sure what we're going to be reading yet. He hasn't sent me his poem list that he wants to read, but I love that title, and he's really got a lot of great books, a lot of stories, a lot of blue-collar stuff. He's one of those poets that has done a whole bunch of stuff in his life, like a lot of odd jobs, a lot of interesting things he's done, which is always fun. That's Dave Newman, Rattlecast number 290, this Sunday, April 20th. Yes, I believe that is Easter Sunday, and today's Good Friday, I guess. But we're doing it anyway. That'll be Rattlecast number 290 with Dave Newman, regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.